Okay, we'll make a start, guys. Well, thanks very much for joining us and welcome to this Pro-Noctis webinar. Boy, have we got a fantastic guest for you today. Not only is he a top bloke, he's also a three-time Olympic champion at 3 different Olympics, 6-time world champion and 5-time European track cycling championship. But before we get into the main man himself, we're really, really privileged to have Jane with us. Jane is an award-winning psychologist, and Jane's going to play a part of being the resident professional, the resident psychologist of adding some context regarding what Ed's talking about regarding performing under pressure into your world and into the world of business. So do you want to say a quick hello, Jane?
Yes, hello everybody. I'm really pleased to be here and I'm looking forward to hearing what Ed's got to share with us.
Great stuff. And also beavering away in the background right now, which you can definitely not see, admitting the late joiners and muting everybody and turning their cameras off, is Nathan Abbott. Nathan's the senior consultant here at Pro-Noctis, and he's also been a coach developer for the likes of British Canoeing, British Sailing, and more recently a leadership consultant with Pro-Noctis and UK Sport. So we've got a wealth of experience and knowledge on the line today. So where should we start then with Mr. Ed Clancy? Ed, how's things been for you the last week or 10 days or so?
Pretty good, yeah. I think you've just got to try and look at the. It's not particularly easy, I guess, at the moment. There's been a lot of turmoil. You know, the Olympics postponed a year. We've had to close down the Clancy Briggs Academy. But you know, it's the same for everyone. You know, everyone's experiencing a fairly significant change in life. But yeah, I'd say overall we're doing okay. We're making plans and we're cracking on with it best we can. And I'm looking forward to my first webinar. So first of all, thanks everyone for joining in. I've made a nice little display behind me here, so hope that's working well for everyone.
Yeah, it looks really good. Bike looks fast, actually. that's what comes out of me. It looks really fast. Just to add a little bit of context then before we start and get into the main themes, can you just shed a little bit of light on your relationship with us guys here at Pro-Noctis for the people that maybe are not aware?
Yeah, so I've been working with you guys since, was it even before, almost 2014, is it?
Yeah.
2013 even with JLT. And then I guess we worked sort of closer and closer together on the build up to Rio. And then I guess since then we've been in touch every week or so. And basically I just use you guys as what I call a safety net. So, you know, I work in a pretty tight circle within British cycling. We've still got psychologists that we speak to in British cycling, but with you guys, it's a case of if I ever need to get anything else off my chest and it's more appropriate to do it with you guys rather than do it internally with British cycling, you know, I take advantage of that. And, you know, we're in touch pretty regularly, me and you, Phil. And for me, I think, I don't want to blow too much smoke up you at the moment, but I think you're a good person at sort of helping me become sort of interdependent. So you're not necessarily someone that comes to me and says, these are the answers. You're someone that says, why don't you go and approach this guy about this? Or why don't you try and pick this guy's brains about that? And you kind of challenge me and put questions back to me. And I guess that's how we work together.
Yeah, it's very much a collaboration, isn't it? And it sort of come to the forefront last week as well, didn't it? You know, in terms of if we rewind 10 days, we all sort of got the news a week last Monday that obviously the UK in particular is going to be coming into lockdown. And then within 24 hours, you got the news that Tokyo was being postponed. With a future date TBC. That must have been a busy time inside the head of Ed Clancy. So do you want to share a little bit of light of sort of your journey last week?
Yeah, I think this is probably going to be a theme that's going to be fairly topical throughout, you know, today's conversation. But I think, you know, when you're presented with an immediate stressful situation like that, it's important to remember that you've got a choice. I'm not talking about a choice in terms of you know, what you do. Do you sort of like, you know, do you retire? Do you carry on? Do you speak to this person? Speak to that person? I'm talking about a bit more of like a mental choice. You know, you've got a choice whether you want to, you know, when something grabs you like that, it's easy to be rattled. And, you know, I'm not professing that I've got everything under control in my life. You know, when something like that happens and you've been preparing for a race for 4 years and you feel like you've jumped through every single hoop, and to be completely frank, there's one race I was looking forward to doing after Rio, you know. I don't want to belittle the importance of Europeans and World Championships and so on, but I just wanted to make it to one more Olympics. And I kind of felt like after World Championships, I'd done everything necessary to be selected in that team. And I was very much looking forward to riding in Tokyo. And then obviously I saw it coming slowly over a period of a couple of weeks, and then what started off as rumours gathered a bit more momentum, and there was more voices speaking out about postponement, and then ultimately you're hit with the official news that is going to be postponed. And I'm talking about this choice, and then I guess your immediate reaction is to be a bit like, oh no, what am I going to do? This is a big hit. Life's terrible. This is very much unfair. Why do these things happen to me? And then I guess you've quite quickly got to try and talk some sense into yourself and be like, come on, let's get it together. There's still going to be an Olympics. It's just been postponed. Everyone understands and accepts the facts of life. Life is unfair. The goalposts move, and I guess it's just a case of being right. The goalposts have moved. What are you going to do about it? And then you've got to sit down and make an action plan. And I had a couple of good conversations with Ian, the coach at Bripside, and Lawrence, a physiologist, and it was just a case of making a plan from there and trying to see it out.
I think there was loads of things there, Ed, you were talking about regarding dealing with the situation at hand, and that's something you must have been exposed to. Well, for nearly on 15 years now, isn't it? Has this been one of the most challenging times, do you think, in your career?
Yeah, is the short answer. It has been a challenging time. I think it's kind of easy to, I don't know, brush over it. And there's ways you kind of deal with that, though. The first thing you try and do is keep it in perspective. I'm big on that. There's it's been talked up in the press, and again, I don't want to belittle the importance of sport or what I do or anything like that, but when something like this happens, I try and start off with perspective. And it's easy to think that this is, don't get me wrong, when you sat on the start line and you're lined up in an Olympic final with 3 of your best mates, you'd rather die than let that team down. Do you know what I mean? It feels important at the time, but when you can step away from it and see things for what they are, it's very much a first world problem. Right now, there is a global epidemic going on. I am a 35-year-old man that puts on a lycra skin suit and races his bike around a big wooden bowl. You know what I mean? It's of course it's a hit, and don't get me wrong, for a period of time you hurt inside, but I think the first thing I do when I'm hit with something like that is try and put it in perspective, and quite quickly you can sort of rationalize with yourself, really, and kind of start speaking in facts and truths and logic and say, right, this isn't the end of the world. The Olympics is going to happen a year later. That might not necessarily be a great thing for a guy that's 35 years old. However, you understand, you accept that the goalpost can move, and this is just one of those occasions. And I guess it's an opportunity for an ultimate test. Can you realign yourself? Can you move? Can you sort of can you adapt? And when you think about it, that's what sport's all about. We've just been presented with another hurdle that we've got to jump over to make it there.
I think you can go a stage further, and this might be one for you, Jane, here. I think you can map over what you said there to real-time life. Goalposts move. I know some of the business people that are on the call today, and some of them are clients of ours, and some of them work really closely with Ed. I can see the names on the side there. And thanks very much for joining, guys. But having to jump through hurdles, Jane, is a common theme at the moment that we're having conversations around, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, what Ed was really alluding to there is that perspective. Somehow we've got to be focusing on the things we can control, because there's such a lot of change at the moment. And I can't even imagine, Ed, I get distressed if I can't go for a bit of a jog. When you've got that focus and it's everything to you and it's your whole life, being able to be flexible in your thinking is, it's admirable. And I think in a work context, we set objectives, don't we? We know what our teams are meant to be doing. We know what our function is, what the strategy is of an organisation. And yet in this time when everything's changing, we really have to drill down and think about what we can control, what we can focus on, like you're saying.
Yeah, we use the theme with Ed, and I'm sure it's been used across the business thing, and anybody that's worked at Pro-Noctis will be bored of it probably, but it's so true, especially when you're under times of stress, is control the controllables, Ed, isn't it? And that's what That's what our conversations do. You know, when you're being challenged, is take away that emotional response, which is normally outside of your influence and concern, and coming back within that circle of control of what can I actually do about it. Do you wanna add a little bit towards that, Ed?
Yeah, so like you said, it's been said time and time again, you know, control the controllables and everything else that you simply have no control over. It's just a case of accepting. And that's, you know, you go through all those, I'm sure you can talk about that, the different stages of sort of like coming to accept something. It's kind of like minor grief, isn't it? When you hit with something like this, or if you're a business owner or you work in the NHS, all of a sudden you've been given a big right hook out of the middle of nowhere. And it's just a case of like, coming to acceptance. Now that takes time, but I guess you can speed up that process by. I'll tell you a little story now. I sat down with Steve Peters. This must have been 10 years ago, perhaps even more. And you know, it was one of the very first conversations I had with anyone to do with psychology or human performance or anything. And I can't remember exactly what I was moaning about, but it had been. You know, something fairly minor along the lines of like, you know, life's unfair, or this shouldn't happen, and all that stuff. And it was kind of like a scene out of a movie, like the layer cake thing. I don't know if you remember, where Daniel Craig sat down with the big boss man at the end, and he somewhat got done over, and the big boss man sort of spelt out the facts of life. Steve Peters did that with me, and he said, the facts of life are, number one, life's unfair. Number two, the goalposts move. And I can't remember what the third one was, but he gave me a big list of facts that at the time, it sounds like a negative conversation. It wasn't. It was something that you've got to get your head around. And if you can do that, all of a sudden you can be more accepting. And I guess at this point in time, it all rings very true. Life is unfair. The goalposts move. You know, not everyone has the same values I do, and so on. And you know, I guess once you can come to accept those, then it just makes that sort of grieving stage happen a little bit quicker. And then once you've sort of over that, you can make a new master plan and try and see it out.
Yeah, and that's something that stood out last week, actually, Ed, because Monday and Tuesday happened, and by Friday you'd made a decision.
Yeah, you know, it's. I guess it's something that you learn as well. You know, this is not something that that happens. And you know, if people want to go away with anything today, I guess it's the idea that, like, so imagine if you're a sports person, and everyone knows and accepts that if you want to be fit and healthy from a physical point of view, you've got to go to the gym, whatever, 2, 3, 4 times a week, right? And it's very much the same with sort of mental health. You can't expect to be hit by, you know, a massive curveball like that, or walk into an Olympic final or whatever it is, and be like, okay, great, I've got the sort of mental skills and mental capacity to sort of turn on a dime and sort of like get over this, accept it, and make a new plan and move on. It's a sort of mental skill that you have to work on over time. And I guess there's certain steps you can do to, you know, work on that mindset, work on being able to get into that mindset. It's like homework, you know, you can take homework and you can write down positive things at the end of the day. You can sort of rationalize with yourself, and yeah.
Yeah, and that's where your support network is so important, isn't it? Within British Cycling and obviously your friends, family, etc., and the work we do with you is because it helps you sort of rationalize it in your own mind so you can make an informed and logical decision.
Yes, exactly. I mean, that's why I work with you guys quite closely. You know, I identified quite early in my career, to be honest, that this was an important thing, not just in terms of sport, but in terms of life. You know, that I think your mind is and your thoughts can be your best enemy. So your best friend or your worst enemy, and so you've got to be able to make the most of that. And it seems quite ridiculous when you think about the amount of time we spend training and, you know, eating right and sleeping right, and the hours and hours and hours of track sessions and training we do, flying all over the world to get physically fit. You know, if you're not even going to spend 5 minutes a day just noting down the positive thoughts or trying to rationalize with yourself and trying to understand which parts of your brain are thinking this and why.
Yeah, and I think there's some takeaways there in terms of that that way of managing your own performance for some of the business guys on there. I'm keen to get into the deeper into the theme, Ed, in terms of, you know, performing under pressure. So can you lay it out in simple terms? And what's it like being an Olympian? You know, you're on a 4-year training cycle, constant pressure coming from whether it's the media, the coach, yourself, and then obviously leading that up into being on the start line of an Olympic final where it's going to be gold or silver, end of, nothing else.
Yeah, so I'll try and paint 2 different pictures for you. The first picture I'll try and paint is when you're in the wrong state of mind. Now, again, I remember this is a choice, right? So this is going in to an Olympic final in the wrong state of mind. So you walk into that velodrome, it's your home Olympics. There's been more talk about this Olympics than there was 4 years ago when you were riding and winning a gold medal in Beijing, right? You walk into that velodrome for the gold silver final. You're there with 3 of your best mates, everyone in that, all 6,000, 7,000 people in that velodrome, and all the millions of people on TV expect you to win because this is the Great Britain cycling team, and that's what you do in the Olympics. You're reigning Olympic champions. However, in your mind, which at the moment isn't functioning particularly well, you know that Geraint's ill. You know that Pete came out of the Giro d'Italia in a wheelchair. You know that me and Berkey aren't quite on form. You know that we've had 5 punctures in training. You know that these tyres aren't tested. You know that you weren't feeling particularly good in the semi-final, but you've still got to get up there and lay it out. And now your head's just full of so many ifs and buts and what happens and so on and maybe. You're surrounded by literally thousands of people, probably in that week will have told you that this is the biggest thing you're ever going to do. This is make or break. And the outcome of the next 4 minutes is going to change the rest of your lives. Now, it's so easy to be in that mindset where it's just full of emotional nonsense, to be honest. It's just, I mean, a lot of sports, that's what it's about. When you listen to commentators, they big up the emotion, they big up the passion and all that. And that's great, you know, that makes sport. But when you're sitting on that start line, you don't want to be thinking about your mum crying in the crowds, or how this could change your life, or what if we have a puncture, or what if we crash. These are just so many, like, if you let your mind wander, and it's so easy for it to do that, you can be in a terrible place. So you've got to make that, it's not a choice, but you are able, even in those circumstances, to kind of use it. People call it different things. Like Steve Peters would call it, like, that's a chimp talking for you. Now you've got to get into like a logical frame of mind. So when you're in that start line with that amount of pressure on you, you've got to work with like fact, logic and reason, and your values as well. And that's a big thing. We'll perhaps get onto that later, which underpins all of this. So when you sit on that start line, when you go into the velodrome, you've got to constantly recite to yourself facts and truth and logic. Like, I'm a full grown man. I'm in it's a wonderful opportunity to be in my home Olympics. We're already looking at a silver medal as a minimum. I'm going to go out there and I'm going to ride my bike, following a strategy, you know, which we've worked out and understood after, you know, hours and hours and hours and hours and, you know, days and months, years of training. This is our optimum strategy. We are going to try and see this out. I do want to be here. I'm going to do my best. And if you keep reciting logic and fact, it tends to sort of quieten down that. It's like the devil on your shoulder, just giving you ifs and whats and maybes. So back to your original question, how do you cope with the pressure? You recite logic and fact and truth, and you understand that all this sort of this chatter is coming from a part of your brain which has no use in an Olympic velodrome.
Other than to scupper the performance normally, you know. I think emotions can be helpful, you know, they can be helpful, but more often than not, they're a negative impact on performance. And as you were chatting there, Ed, there was a few things I was writing down. So I was thinking in terms of how you perform under pressure, you basically got this battle between emotion and logic, haven't you? You're trying to control your excitement and your natural adrenaline by overpowering it by logical, running the process of getting around that track as quickly as you can, rather than worrying about the outcome, which is winning gold.
Yeah, that's that key word, process. It's just process.